So as I rock a new Islanders jersey today, new to me anyways, I got this from Full Moon. It was $40 American. Canadian American difference is coming down, people. I've noticed a difference in the amount of money it cost me to buy a jersey. It's come down at least by a couple of bucks per jersey, and it's been nice. But I wanted to discuss something, and I figure with the old school Islanders, I mean, if it wasn't for this on the shoulder, you're basically looking at almost an identical jersey to the one that they wore in the 80s. Yesterday, when I was at the Canucks store, which I love those two words together, it's fantastic. When I was at the Canucks store, they had a game on TV. They had Buffalo and Philly. It was funny because every 2 seconds I heard the name Jerry Korab. And then I think there was a fight Jerry Korab was in too, and I thought, that's kind of weird, because I would talk about that on my channel, how he was one of my favorite Sabres. And I'm pretty sure, I didn't get the date on the game, but I'm pretty sure by the fact there was no names on the back of the jerseys, just the numbers. And just from the grade of the film, this is probably 1980 or earlier. So it was kind of fun, but reminded me of something somebody has said, and there's been a comment made today as well. Comparing the old game with the new. And I think there's a pride for those of us who are over a certain age in terms of the players that we grew up watching. But the game has improved, and the players have improved. Their fitness level is higher. They're in shape all year. Fitness regimens, vitamins, you name it, everything's better. The sticks are better. The equipment's better. Everything's better. Skaters skate faster than they did back then. Part of the game that I was watching yesterday, what stands out is the chaos. There was no form to the game like there is now. I mean, you had your two defensemen and your three forwards, but everything else was a schmoz. This was before you had multiple coaches. You just had your head coach. This was before instant replays and any kind of video anything. It was a completely different game. And it's funny because we always get into these discussions of, well, if so-and-so had played in that era, then he would have been great. Sure. But at the same time, if you're going to put a player from today in the 80s, for it to be fair, they have to go to that exercise regimen. They have to go to all of the things that players in the 80s had. Because here's the thing. I really doubt that some of the guys who played back in the 80s and even the late 70s, I highly doubt they would have struggled in today's game. Some of them, yes. I know when you see pictures of today's players next to some of these older guys who are in their 60s, 70s, and you see pictures and you're like, wow, that's a legend and that's a current player. The next thought in your mind is, the young kid is huge. That old guy looks tiny. Realizing, of course, I'm about the height of the old guy. And that is a change, and that is something different. But at the same time, I don't think it invalidates anything that players did in the 80s or earlier. I think that we're simply in an age where, thanks to technology and thanks to the amount of coaches and the amount of videotape and the amount of everything that there is at the disposal of hockey teams, are today's athletes the best? Absolutely. And I think that crosses a lot of sports. I think football players are the best they've ever been. I'm scared sometimes watching football because it used to be that the big 350-pound guys, they couldn't move. So they'd be the big linemen, the ball would get snapped, and then they just kind of fall forward. Not now. Now those big guys can move. They can motor. Baseball players just keep getting bigger and stronger. And this new Yankees kid, he's a phenom. It's hard for me not to do a video on him because I really think, looking back, we may see this as the beginning of a very special career. Basketball players are absolutely better than they were. I know when I watch college basketball games, I watch these guys and I think, why aren't there more NBA teams? In that there just seems to be a lot of premier talented players in basketball who will never get a chance to play professionally in the United States because you only have a set number of players on a roster. It's not a very big number. So despite the fact that you have lots of teams, the actual number of players remains kind of small. Hockey doesn't have that. Hockey's got, 700 players in their union right now. It's over 700. And there's a lot of players. But when I look at some of the guys who struggle now, and they're tweeners, they're not quite good enough to be regular NHLers, but they're clearly ahead of the game in the American Hockey League. I'm reminded of in the 80s when you'd see a guy who gets called up and you'd groan. You'd just groan and go, oh, they called up who? Oh, no, he can't play. Why are you calling him up? I don't see that anymore. I really don't. There seems to be more NHL-ready talent in the American League now than there was 30 years ago, which factors into the whole expansion topic. Are they diluting the talent pool? Yes, but I think the talent pool is the deepest it's ever been. And where it gets tough again is this. The 80s were the 80s. The game was what it was. We don't have any way of putting a current player up against a player from the 80s and saying, all right, let's see who's going to win. And when people say, oh, the guy from now will win, probably. But I have a hard time believing that if Gretzky had access to all of what players have now, so if Wayne Gretzky was coming up out of junior right now as a 16-year-old, I think the hype around him would still be just as high. I think it'd be huge. Because he had so much talent. He was so smart. He could see so much of the ice. But it's an interesting topic. I think with players now, the other part that affects things is if you were a player in the 70s or the 80s, and let's say you had a drinking problem or you had some other behavioral issue, it might be known locally, but it kind of glossed over probably. And if you're a good player and you're good at what you do, then people might just ignore it. But now, with the way social media is, and with the fact that almost every player seems to have Twitter, it's a big deal. This guy's been drinking a bunch. And it's like, I sometimes wonder if we don't overanalyze and overhandle certain players. But at the same time, look at the results. The game's better than it's ever been. The only thing holding hockey back, the only thing right now that I think is holding the NHL back is calling the rules consistently. Because if you're a new fan and you're just learning the game, and you go through the rule book and you go, okay, all those things are against the rules, gotcha. And then you watch a game, you're going to be like, no, he just, didn't he, why? And then you'll ask somebody who's an experienced fan, why aren't they calling that? And the experienced fan will answer with, well, yeah, that's a penalty in the first, but it's a tie game and it's late in the third, so they don't want to have the referees decide the game. At which point, the new guy takes the rule book and just throws it aside and goes, all right, that's stupid. It's the only sport I know of where that happens. So, and then for me, the other thing, and I've talked about this before, the other thing that holds the game back is marketing. They got to market the game better. But I look back, and again, I've got magazines on it. Coolest game on ice. We got to 2000, it was coolest game on ice. Didn't stick. It just didn't stick. Peter Puck back in the 80s. Kind of stuck with little kids, but it pushed Peter Puck, and it didn't really make a difference for the NHL. I mean, I had a Peter Puck shirt. I'm pretty sure I had a Peter Puck shirt. But it didn't make me more likely to watch an NHL game. I just liked having a Peter Puck shirt or any Peter Puck items because he was pretty cool. I'm kind of surprised they haven't brought him back big time, but maybe it's because he doesn't push the game. Anyways, I'd be interested to know you guys, what you guys think and your thoughts on the matter. And comparing today's game with yesterday's game is impossible. So, which player from the 80s do you think would have most easily dominated the present day? All right, I had an interruption. So yeah, tell me which player from the 80s you think would have dominated. Here's the interesting thing too. So, and me granting, guys are bigger, they're in better shape, the game's faster. Which player from today's game that we look at and say, ugh, he's terrible, if you planted him back in the 80s, would have been considered fantastic, or at the very least a very good player? Be interested to see the names that come up below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I don't know if I did that part yet or not. And thank you very much for watching. You guys are awesome. Happy Thursday, and I'll talk to you again soon.